Thank you. The gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Chabot, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Attorney General, every riot or act of violence or threat thereof taking place anywhere in this nation, whoever's responsible for it is unconscionable. And we on this side, Republicans, we reject it, we condemn it. As elected members of Congress, we must do our part and call out acts of violence, just not those that fit a particular partisan narrative. We need to reject them all. Democrats, unfortunately, have been very focused on the rhetoric that led up to the riots on January 6th, and yet for the most part, they've been silent when similar language and tactics are used by their supporters. Following the unprecedented leak of the Supreme Court's draft decision in Dobbs, Democrats ignored the threats of violence, including an assassination attempt on a Supreme Court justice. In addition to pro-abortion activists, these abortion activists have targeted Supreme Court justice. Fanatics professing pro-abortion views have targeted, destroyed, and vandalized dozens and dozens of pro-life facilities and churches to further a political cause. Arguably, the incendiary rhetoric used by some on the radical left has only encouraged that violence against those facilities and those justices and is putting lives at risk. Members of Congress must condemn, not condone, violence in furtherance of a political agenda. Look no further than Senator Chuck Schumer, who took to the steps of the Supreme Court in 2020 when the court was considering a Louisiana pro-life law and said, quote, "I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions." That's what Chuck Schumer said, the Democratic head over in the Senate. Assistant Attorney General Olsen, is that the kind of rhetoric that's helpful when trying to avert abortion-related violent extremism?
So I completely agree with you, Congressman, that this is not a partisan issue. Everyone who serves in a position of public trust, certainly at the very top, are the members of our Supreme Court, deserve to be safe, and we have taken very seriously the threats of violence and violence. And in fact, we are prosecuting an individual with attempted assassination of Justice Kavanaugh. We have provided support and protection through the Marshal Service to the Supreme Court. We have supported legislation to increase that support. We take that extremely seriously. Similarly, you mentioned the attacks on pregnancy resource centers and pro-life centers and groups. Also, not a partisan issue. Violence, threats of violence, absolutely not acceptable. The FBI has opened a series of cases involving those attacks or threats against those resource centers. Some of them opened as domestic violent extremist cases. So this is not a partisan issue for the Justice Department.
You absolutely need to do that because we've got facilities there where these organizations are trying to help women in need and they're being attacked, and it's outrageous. As we saw in June, the radical pro-abortion group Ruth Sent Us, the same organization that originally posted the addresses of the 6 conservative justices, published the name of Justice Amy Coney Barrett's church and the school her children attend, the very school that her young children attend, encouraging protesters to, quote, "voice your anger." Is that the kind of rhetoric that's helpful when trying to avert abortion-related violent extremism?
I think, again, we look at acts of violence and threats of violence that violate the criminal law. It is an unfortunate fact of our civic life that there is strong language, reprehensible language on both sides.
I assume you would condemn putting up a Supreme Court justice's children's, what school they go to, what church they attend. You don't condone doing that sort of thing, do you?
Look, I may personally find certain comments or statements reprehensible or not acceptable, but in my role at the National Security Division, we look at threats of violence and we prosecute those at the same time that we protect Americans' rights to enjoy their First Amendment rights.
Let me ask you this. Another leftist group, Shut Down DC, offered bounties to DC industry workers, waiters, et cetera, for reporting confirmed sightings of conservative justices and additional money if the justices were still at the establishment 30 minutes after the initial report. Is offering bounties for sightings of justices helpful when we're trying to avert violent extremism?
So, again, our goal is to investigate and prosecute crimes, threats of violence, and violence. It is one of our cherished protections that people can speak out under the First Amendment and do so in ways that obviously many people, if not most, don't agree with. That's part of what it means to be an American.
Well, they're putting a lot of lives
The
in danger, and I know
gentleman's
my
time has
time's expired,
expired.
so I yield back.